It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. As normal, I've got a lot going on, but a couple of things have been resolved. First of all, if you've listened to the last few shows over the last few weeks, you may remember that my brother passed away on August 2nd at the age of 61, which now doesn't seem that old to me, being in my mid-50s, but we have had the service and done the gravesite entombment of his ashes. It was interesting. I had a few people say, why are you doing a service for him? You're not religious. It wasn't for me. It's what he would want. I consider that pretty much a sacred duty if you have an obligation. You do have an obligation. If you are the person setting things up, you should do what that person would want, because I expect that the people that I leave behind will do what I want. It's just the way I think the world should work. So we've got that done. I've also mentioned Polaris is now formally registered with the federal SEC instead of state SECs. And the next thing is the formal change of my address. So I don't technically live in Florida yet because I haven't registered that with the federal SEC, but that is one of the next steps. Another totally unrelated topic. Again, I've had people go crazy on me for Bitcoin, and this probably won't help any, but it's one of those things that total crypto market has fallen from 3 trillion to 1 trillion. Why is it worth 1 trillion? I don't know that it is. But here's the funny thing. There is more than 9,000 cryptocurrencies listed on coinmarketcap.com. 9,000. And in the past, when I've talked to some people, they'll say, well, 99% of those are crap. It's like saying 99% of all gods are make-believe, but my one isn't. This is what we're doing, folks. Now, of that 1 trillion, Bitcoin is 40%. So when people ask me, why do I focus on Bitcoin when there's so many other cryptocurrencies? Because it's still the beast. It's 40%. Next is Ethereum, which is 20%. So the top two coins are 60%. What I find fascinating, absolutely fascinating, in the top 6, 3 of them are stable coins. And basically stable coins, at least from my perspective and from the rankings that I see here, they're all tied to the U.S. dollar. How they're tied to the U.S. dollar, are they actually backed up and supported by the U.S. dollar? That is why in the recent weeks and months, we've had some stable coins collapse and go to zero because they weren't. Let me pretend for a moment that these 3 out of the top 6 are backed dollar for dollar from the U.S. dollar. This basically is an alternate electronic version of a dollar. Why you would use it? I don't know. Maybe it's quick and maybe it's easy. Maybe it's kind of secret. Maybe your loved ones don't know what you're doing with the money. I don't know. I don't care. But the interesting thing is 3 of the top 6 are essentially alternate forms of the US dollar, which one of the points of cryptocurrency is to not be linked to a quote unquote fiat currency. So 3 of the top 6 that remain are linked to the US dollar. That is hysterical. And of course, when we get down to number 10, we have Dogecoin, which is apparently worth $9 billion. That rounds out the top 10. A coin that was intentionally started as a joke. A coin that went up to almost $1 per share after Elon pumped it, which is now 7 cents. So losing something around 90% of its value. Recently saw a video, you can go look for it, from Robert Reich, the famous economist, and the title of it, Is Crypto Really Going to Crash? Yes, by Robert Reich. Yeah, I think that's worth a listen. He does recap what's going on. It just popped into my head, by the way. The market cap of all these cryptos is based on the current price of a coin or a token today times the number of tokens available. This does not count, or this does not take into effect the coins that are permanently lost. The hard drives that have gone into the trash dump, the computer that died and you can't get it off, the thumb drive that you stored your secret stash on that you lost, some of the theft that where coins have been taken and disappeared and no one's ever going to get them back. And for the people that still have their computer and or thumb drive but can't recall how to get past the security protocols to access their own money. So all of that, I don't know what percentage it is still counted in this $1 trillion. And of course, the security is a joke. The cryptocurrencies keep getting stolen again and again and again. And there's no real process for you to recover globally from all of these coins. So avoid it, get out of it, whatever. You know my opinion. Tied to that, pardon me for a minute, I've had a few people lately, and I'm not sure what is driving this, but want to talk to me and ask my opinions on things. And during the conversation, I give my opinions, and then they indicate that they know my opinion, but they're not going to follow my advice anyway. Okay, cool. Why did you ask? I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know if they were hoping that during a conversation on the phone one-on-one, I had some kind of different answer. People who know me should know that what I say on the show is what I think. I swear on the show just like I do in person. The ideas don't change from one platform to another. It's what I think, right or wrong. I mean, I could be totally wrong with crypto, and someday people will have a great laugh. I don't think so. But then again, that's why I have the opinions that I have, because based on the information. So it is fascinating to me that when people contact me, ask for my opinion, and then acknowledge that they already knew my opinion and they're not going to follow it. Fascinating. Why? Why are we doing that process? Why? I don't know. But that's something, that has come up multiple times lately that just, it doesn't offend me, it doesn't hurt me, but it's interesting what has driven that. Maybe it's just a statistical anomaly that it's bound to happen at some point, and it just happened to be the last few weeks. Anywho, coming up in today's show is part 6 of 6. Yes, I somehow managed to wrap it all up in 6 segments, the Polaris Plan. Of course, today is the Polaris Plan part 6, talking about the U.S. stock market and the Vanguard Index funds that I use for this purpose. And I do have, after all of that, a little Comcast / Xfinity update in my, I almost said love-hate relationship. Never really had any love. It's just been a lot of pain and anguish. And I do hope that it's over, because I have fired them. I have canceled them, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop a month or two from now when they tell me I still owe them for the piece of equipment that I returned in January, almost 8 months ago, that they can't seem to find. So fingers crossed that all works out in some way. So going to wrap up here with this introductory stuff, take a quick little break, and then we'll go into the Polaris Plan Part 6.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Nothing seems crazy when you're used to it. There's so much crazy shit everywhere. We're used to it. And everything seems crazy when you're not used to it. That's why so many comics make fun of Scientology, right? Because because it's a batshit crazy religion, but it's no more batshit crazy than every single religion. It's just new, Christianity is super old, but it's fucking crazy. I mean, you're born a sinner. By being born, you are a sinner and you're going to hell. But you can just apologize and then you can go to heaven. No big deal. If you're a murderer, same thing, it's just apologize and go to heaven. You can be Hitler and go to confession and say, forgive me, Father, I killed 6 million Jews. And the priest would just be like, no problem, say 10 Hail Marys. And Hitler goes to heaven. Hitler goes to heaven is the name of my band. Scientology is weird because it's new. It feels weird in our ear holes to hear people worshiping a guy named Ron. We know Rons in our life. He had to change his name to L. Ron because there was another Ron Hubbard in the Writers Guild. That's how recent a religion it is. And people who follow their religion to the letter of the law are just silly. I mean, I want to tell Hasidic Jews, I promise you, God will not mind if you wear a nice cotton blend in the summer. You're being fucking ridiculous. But we live in the greatest country in the world, a country where we have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, only we don't at all and nobody says anything because we're used to it. It says in God we trust on our money. It says in God we trust above the judge's bench in a courtroom, in a court of law where you have to put your hand on a Bible, the Christian Bible. It's not my Bible. I mean, if I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth, not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish. That's fucking crazy. That's craziness.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This is part 6 out of 6 for the Polaris Plan, so we're going to wrap up with this one. We have talked about the overall philosophies: buy low, sell high, rebalance, dollar cost average in, dollar cost average out, kind of a contrarian view where the things that have done less well maybe should get a little bit more money. Also, slow moves, taking your time. This is not day trading, but we're not blind to some things that can be seen in the market. We also don't make adjustments every day, and sometimes maybe not even for the year. We've also talked about the 4 books that I think are sufficient, although maybe not necessary, but sufficient for you to learn a lot about how this process works or can work, and how you can make a reasonably good return with a reasonable amount of volatility in such a way that, given time, you will beat 90+% of all other investors. I don't know how to do better than that, and I'm pretty happy with that, and it's treated me very, very well, and it can you too, but it does take time. So if you're 60 and you're just starting and you want to retire at 62, well, that's going to be really rough, and this is not going to work for you. You may try something else, but it's probably not going to work either. Time is really, really important. We've talked about how much is in the cushion, how much is international in stocks, and now we're going to get to the U.S. domestic side. And so the first thing I want to do is say, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, go do that. So you have to figure out first how much cash to have on hand, how much to have in your bank, and then what portion of your investment portfolio do you want to be in the cushion. And that will change over time, that will change with conditions, and that may change with your ability to accept volatility and or price corrections. But then once we figure out how much is in stock market, stock investments, stock index funds mostly, the first thing I want to pull out is the international portion. And you do that and you follow part 5 of this series to figure out where to invest internationally. And now we're getting down smaller and smaller. We're going to talk about the U.S. stock market. One thing that I do like is the Vanguard REIT fund, and I'm talking about VGSLX. It's a small portion of the domestic part of the portfolio. I normally think of it as about 5% of all of your stock investments. So if you are investing in stocks and or index funds or managed funds, 30 plus, maybe 35% might be international today. This is in August of 2022, and I talked about my reasons for those ratios currently. And another 5%, maybe 10% in REITs. And keep in mind that you want to buy a good, well-managed REIT index funds. You do not want to go and buy REITs on your own. It is a very complicated marketplace, and you definitely don't want to buy what I call private placement REITs, where you go to a website and they talk about how they buy into shopping malls or senior homes or whatever strategy they have, and you invest directly with them. Generally speaking, those are horrific. We've done episodes on that. Go search that out. I'm not going to cover that all right now. And now we are to the part of general U.S. stock market. Oh, by the way, I have had people point out in the past that the REIT portion, the Vanguard REIT fund, is redundant and overlapping with the other funds that I use. There is merit to that argument. The Vanguard REIT fund does allow them to actually buy some real estate, not just companies that buy real estate. So it's not 100%, but there is overlap. I just like it. I don't know if I have a really good argument, but I do know historically sometimes the real estate fund will go up when U.S. stock market and international stocks are down. And so it just provides another way to make money and or to be able to sell something high or to add to something that's low. But again, the REIT, 5 to 10%. I'm kind of leaning more towards the 5 at this point in time, but if you wanted to do 10%, that's fine. Now, on to the general U.S. stock market. We've gone through all the slices and dices, and we figured out we're now down to just the money that you're going to invest in the total or in the U.S. stock market. If your portfolio is small, I don't know, under 30, under 50,000, buying the total stock market index and having only the one position is fine. Don't sweat it. Now, as you get more money, because each one of these positions will require $3,000, I believe, is the minimum to get in, even at Vanguard. You can break it up, but the gain that you get on having what I generally use are 6 different funds versus the one fund, it's small. Sometimes we get lucky and it's several percentage points bigger, and sometimes it's not several points bigger. It might even be several points smaller. So don't overthink this when you have a really small portfolio. I know that sounds bad, but 50,000 or less. If you get over 50,000 for the United States stock market, you could then break and not use just the total stock market. You could use the S&P 500 and the extended market. In the United States, the extended market fund here, I'll give you symbols for all this here in a minute. The extended market is everything not in the S&P 500. So first of all, total stock market index mutual fund, index fund at Vanguard is VTSAX. The S&P 500 Admiral Shares Index Fund is VFIAX. The extended market fund is VXAX. Now, assuming you have well over 100,000 in the U.S. stock market, which means you might have a portfolio of $200,000 or more. But we're going to look at a theoretical $100,000 in the United States stock market. And of course, if your portfolio is bigger, yay you can just scale this up. Not a big deal. So I might refer to something that I call market neutral weightings. So as an example, theoretically, growth stocks and value stocks are about 50-50 as far as their weighting in the total U.S. stock market. Generally speaking, growth is a little bit smaller and value is a little bit bigger. we're going to call it 50-50, just to simplify it here. Also, we know, not surprisingly, that the large cap stocks account for a bulk of the market. Depending on how you cut this, these 500 stocks, which are way bigger than the non S&P 500 stocks, which in the United States could be 4 to 5 to 6,000. I honestly haven't looked because it's not relevant to me, but let's say it's 5,000 is the total number of stocks. 10% of the stocks can account for 60, 70, maybe even 75% of all investments, even though they're only 1/10 or 10% of the market. So it's not a terrible place to be, but you don't have the ability of what I'm going to talk about next. And this gets into, again, words that were created or chosen by listeners as being good ways to explain this. So thank you, so many of you over the years, giving me ways to even more better. Oh my God, that's why I need the help. To better explain what I'm trying to get to. And it's called granularity and clarity. And one of the reasons I have problems with just other companies' funds and not Vanguard's is that they don't always stick to what they're saying they're going to do. So, for example, if you get a growth fund, let's say a managed US-based growth stock fund, and you get a growth and value fund, and you get a dividend fund, and you get an aggressive fund and a conservative stock fund and an aggressive growth stock fund, you can buy 5, 6, 8 different US-based stock funds and think, okay, I've pretty much got it all covered. But it is very likely that if you go to Morningstar.com, as I've talked about many times, free to use, and put in the symbol for all of the funds that you have, you may find that every single one of the funds that you own, that at least are US-based stock funds, that they are going to have a generous, large portion of money in Apple and Facebook and Google and Netflix and whatever, all the big names that you know and love. And you might find that they have 60, 70, 80% in 20 stocks. And all 5, 7, 8, 10 funds that you have are investing in the exact same stocks, because what manager, what money manager, what mutual fund manager wants to miss out on the winners? So they also can act as humans and wanting to protect themselves. But with the funds that I use, I'm trying to maximize this separation between different types of investments. As an example, in large cap, I have the large cap growth fund and the large cap value fund. Is there some overlap? Yes, there is. I used to think it was next to nothing, but the world's complicated. And again, a listener helped me understand it's not as clean as I thought it was, but it's the best I can find. So if you find something better, let me know. But the large cap growth fund and the large cap value fund, if you buy them both in about a 50-50% ratio, you will essentially have the S&P 500, which is pretty cool because they don't always go up and down at the same time. As an example, recently I pulled this number. This is from June 30th of 2022. It is not investment advice. I'm just pointing out that for the year prior, ending on June 30th of 2022, the large cap growth fund, which is VIGAX, was down 22%. The large cap value fund, which is VVIAX, was down 2%. So one fund was down 22%, the other one was down 2%. If you own the S&P 500 on that date, your return might be minus 12. Okay, that's fine. I mean, if you own half of one and half of the other versus 100% altogether in one fund, in both cases, you lost 12%. There is no difference. So you say, so you think. But if I'm doing portfolio rebalancing, for most people once a year, north of $1 million, maybe once a quarter. Maybe you look at it once a quarter, and maybe you find some quarters where you don't rebalance it, but maybe once a quarter. No more than that, even for larger portfolios. I don't think it's worth the time and the effort. But in this case, if you are mostly in the stock market and you're adding new money, I want to add more money to large cap growth because it's down 22. And I don't want to add money to large cap value because it's down only 2. Is it making sense? So that's some of the logic with the granularity, having funds that don't overlap a lot. And the clarity is that you can see which fund is doing what. Let me give you some of the other funds before I get sidetracked into that too much. In mid-cap, I use mid-cap growth, which is VM, GMX, and mid-cap value, which is VM, VAX. And you probably guessed it, in the small cap size, small cap growth and value, small cap growth, VSGAX, and small cap value is VSIAX. If you bought these 6 funds, large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value, in the same weightings that they represent in a market neutral way, I guess the weightings based on the actual market, you would get the same results, essentially, without much variation, as if you owned one fund, which would be the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. That's partly why it's okay to have that when you're starting. Keep it simple. Your goal is to save more money. Your problem is having a portfolio that you can manage and adjust and rebalance. The big goal is to add more money, because if you don't have a whole lot of money, the little incremental improvements don't seem worth a whole lot. That they're not going to do anywhere near as much good for you as saving more money. But you have the larger portfolio here in our theoretical example. We use these 6 funds, and not only do you have the granularity, where the funds are distinct from each other, and there's minimal overlap between the funds, and you can see exactly what you own. So if you think to yourself, how much do I have in mid cap? You can see. How much do I have in small cap? You can see. How much do I have in value versus growth? Again, you can take a look. Now, it is also known that over time, and I'm talking long term, and long term for me is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and short term for me is 3 to 5 years, that there are occasional short term variations between these funds that do not continue into the long term. It can be called regression to the mean. I've had some really math experty people say I'm not quite using that term correctly, but I haven't found a better way to say it, so I'm just going to stick with it, and I think most people understand what I'm saying. As an example, I'm going to go back to those 2 large cap stocks, stock index funds. Again, VIGAX, VVIAX, ending June 30th of 2022. Growth is down 22%, value is down 2%. But when I look at the 10-year performance, large cap growth is up 14% a year, and large cap value is up 12% per year. So in the long run, all of these funds, the 6 funds that I use for the US stock market, all of them, generally speaking, make 9, 10 to 11% per year, depending on when you pick as the starting date and the ending date. They all make about the same, which is good to know. But in the short term, 1, 3, 5 years, they don't make the same. And so you have an opportunity where you can rebalance once a year. And when things are underperforming, you're adding more money to what has underperformed in the short term, taking money from what has overperformed in the short term. And in the long term, when things equal out or regress to the mean, you actually end up making more money than if you hadn't done that. You end up making more money than what the total stock market fund would do, because you have the ability to adjust. Now, on top of that, just basic market weighting, I adjust the market weightings to reflect where I think maybe there are opportunities or concerns. As an example, I currently have 50% of US based stock investments, stock index investments, 50% is in large cap, even though it might actually represent 65 to 75% of the total stock market. And you think, well, Phil, if it's 70% of the stock market, should not 70% of your portfolio be in those two things? You could make that argument. That would be a very reasonable argument to make. But I also know, generally speaking, in the long term, 15, 20 years, the entire 100 plus years of the US stock market, mid cap and small cap tend to do a little bit better. Maybe that's disputed or disputable, but that's what I think is true. It's a small amount, 0.5%, 0.3%, but it's there. So that, in my head, I want a little bit of a bias towards mid cap and small cap compared to the market neutral weightings. But at this time, I'm even more motivated to use mid cap and small cap, which is why a large cap is only 50% of the portfolio. And again, I'm going to look at the 10-year number. The large cap as a whole is making 13% per year for the last 10 years. What has small cap done? I'm going to look at small cap growth and small cap value. It is really close to 10%, not 12 or 13%. So it's fallen behind. And mid cap is about 11%. Again, not 12 to 13% like large cap is. So I'm a little more motivated to invest in the things that have lagged than I am in the things that have really gone and done really well. This does not work for individual stocks. I am not aware that this works internationally, but I know it is true with the United States stock market. And a lot of this is discussed in the last two books of my 4-book series that I recommend. The third one, of course, is Winning the Loser's Game, and the fourth one is Common Sense on Mutual Funds. We've covered the book list before. If you don't know it, go back to earlier segments of this series of the Polaris Plan. The other thing that I've done recently, in the last couple of years, short term, a couple of years, is that sometimes growth stocks do way better than value stocks. Sometimes value stocks do way better than growth stocks. An interesting mathematical thing is up until about 10, 12 years ago, if you look back 40 years or more, generally speaking, value beat growth. But in the last 10, probably the last 14 years, growth has beaten value. The more growth beats value, the more years consecutively in a row growth beats value, the more interested I am in putting a slightly larger percent in value as compared to growth. I know it may sound counterintuitive, and this is called a contrarian philosophy that I think works with these 6 segments. These are not market sectors. Market sectors are like that real estate fund I mentioned, and other things like banking or precious metals, financial services. I think there's 11 or 13 of those. That may or may not do this. I don't know. I've not researched it. I've not studied it. But even if they do, I don't know if it's any better to buy 11 or 13 different funds than the 6 that I'm using. So I'm trying to keep it as simple. It's a balance, because if it's so complicated that you're not going to do it, and I already worry about that, then it's not helpful. It has to be not only effective, but doable, because if you don't do it, it doesn't matter how clever it is. So again, going with the idea that the U.S. stock market is about half value and half growth. And that's arbitrary because we draw a line to create it to be half value and half growth. Once growth has outperformed value for several years, I change from 50-50 to maybe something like 52-48 or 48-52, depending on how you're looking at it. So if growth has done better, I make that a smaller portion. So I make that 48 and the value is 52. Right now, across the U.S. stock market and these 6 funds that I use, I'm doing about 60% in value and 40% in growth. And this is driven because the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 12-year returns for growth have been better than value. So one way to reduce, I expect, historically this bears out, that you can reduce volatility is to invest in the things that haven't done as well and trim and profit a little bit from the things that have done really well. And so I went from 50-50 to maybe 48-52 to 45-55, and growth keeps winning. I am now at 40 versus 60%. So 40% growth, 60% value. Back in, let's see, just 22, 21, 20. In 19, when I had slightly started to overweight value versus growth, it didn't work out very well for us. I don't care. I'm not going year to year to year to year to year. I'm looking at the long-term total returns. In calendar year 20, especially with the ginormous drop from COVID in March of 20, but after that point, value really outperformed a lot. 21, value and growth did about the same. But calendar year 2022, as we were talking about earlier, has significantly outperformed. And here is another example from data from a few weeks ago. In mid-cap, growth and value, growth is down 19%, value is down 5%. In small cap, growth is down 17%, value is down 5%, 6%. If you were equally weighted, you would get a mixed result between those two numbers. But because we're 40-60, we've lost a whole lot less than you would have in an equally weighted growth versus value portfolio. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the logic behind it, why we want to have a little bit more in small cap and mid cap than the market neutral position might recommend, because theoretically, in really long periods of time, they do better. We also now have less in large cap growth and value because they've done better in the last 12, 15 years. And now we have less in growth because it's done better. I know that sounds weird. You keep trimming away from the things that have done better. And then you suddenly get a time where, without any real reason that I can think of or knowledge of how this is going to start or when it's going to become, you have a period of time here, year to date in 22, and even for the last 12 months, if you look back, where value has just absolutely crushed growth. The funny thing is, even with that, and I'll look back here at the large cap growth versus value, the 10-year performance is still better for growth. So I'm not in any hurry to change and readjust allocations. But in a year or two or three, if we get to a point where the 10-year history shows that value has overperformed growth by a percentage or two per year for 5 or 10 years, now I definitely want to move more towards a 50-50 mix and maybe even more towards growth. But I don't see that here yet. So I'm going to give you a summary because I'm all over the place here. I'm going to give you the 6 funds and what percent of the total of the U.S. stock market index fund portfolios that they represent. Large cap growth, VIGAX, 20%. Large cap value, VVIAX, 30%. Mid cap growth, VMGMX, 10%. Mid cap value, VMVAX, 15%. Small cap growth, VSGAX, 10%. Small cap value, VSIAX, 15%. I think that all adds up to 100%. That's the 100% for your allocation in the U.S. stock market after you've already done all the breaks in the previous fast 5 parts of the Polaris Plan. These are just ideas. This is not specific investment advice. I probably need to say that more often. This is not what is right for you. It may coincidentally be what is right for you, but you need to understand your situation. You probably should talk to a tax professional, an investment professional. You can use these ideas to help facilitate what you're doing and how you're doing it. And of course, if you have money in IRAs or 401ks or Roth IRAs, it's easier to make the adjustments to have the percentages be something like what I'm doing. The really important parts for this, if you're not a client of Polaris Financial Planning, is create a plan. Follow the plan. Keep your eyes open, adjust the plan, and from time to time, rebalance, maybe once a year, you might be able to avoid rebalancing if you're adding or removing significant amounts of money, because you can take from the winners or you can add to the laggards. So I hope that helps. Any questions or any one of the dozens of side objects or side subjects that I've mentioned, if you want me to talk about them, send me an email, Phil@Polaris Financial Planning. But this wraps up part 6 of 6 of the Polaris Plan. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
What if you're wrong?
Well, what if I'm wrong? I mean, anybody could be wrong. We could all be wrong about the flying spaghetti monster and the pink unicorn and the flying teapot. You happen to have been brought up, I would presume, in the Christian faith. You know what it's like not to believe in a particular faith because you're not a Muslim, you're not a Hindu. Why aren't you a Hindu? Because you happen to have been brought up in America, not in India. If you've been brought up in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were brought up in Denmark in the time of the Vikings, you'd be believing in Wotan and Thor. If you were brought up in classical Greece, you'd be believing in Zeus. If you were brought up in Central Africa, you'd be believing in the great Juju up the mountain. I mean, there's no particular reason to pick on the Judeo-Christian God in which, by the sheerest accident, you happen to have been brought up, and ask me the question, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great Juju at the bottom of the sea?
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I have a quick little update on my experiences with Comcast. I think I've talked about it before. When I first moved to the Chicagoland area, they told me I couldn't transfer from Champaign, the account, to Chicago. So I closed the account. I get up here into Chicagoland and I make a phone call and they said, "Why didn't you transfer your account?" "Because you told me I couldn't." Oh, okay, you should have. Yeah, okay, whatever. Set me up a new account. They promised all the things I was going to get, and it was only going to be $90. And I had to go to the store, though, to pick up the box. I guess the cable box, the receiver box. I think that's what we call it. And they look up my account information, and they come over and they hand me a box. I said, "Where's the second box?" "You don't get 2 boxes. You only get 1 box." But when I signed up over the phone, they said I get 2 boxes. "Nope, you get 1 box. The second box is extra." Well, apparently at some point it also switched that the first box is extra. And then in January of this year, 2022, one of the 2 boxes that I had died. So they shipped me a new one, and I shipped the old one back. And I've been paying $8.50 a month for 3 boxes now for 8 months. And every month I call them and explain to them that I shipped the product back. And of course, they always go, "What's the tracking number?" Well, you have the tracking number because you sent me the ticket. You sent me the packet with the return box and the return envelope and the packing label, or the tracking number for the packing label. And so it becomes a big thing, and they go through their system and they say, "Oh, yes, that looks like that's right. I'm sure it'll be fixed next month." And of course, after 8 months, it's not going to be fixed. So I started seriously, earnestly trying to figure out how to get away from this company. And I found out that T-Mobile, who just recently bought Sprint, which is who my cell phones are with, now has, what do they call it? T-Mobile 5G home Wi-Fi hotspot or something like that. So home internet, that's what they call it, 5G home internet. Got one of those and tried it out. I actually now have one in my Chicago house and my Orlando house, and those are $55 a month. And we signed up for YouTube TV. There's other choices that are a lot cheaper, but we wanted the big bulk of the channels that YouTube TV provides. And so now for $55 a month, I have internet, and for $65, I have 130 channels. Real quick math, 120 versus the 200 that my Comcast bill had become, because Comcast apparently can just randomly change and increase the prices without consulting me, without asking me. And I think it was something like $17.50, almost $18 I pay every month for sports ball stuff. And that's not for the channels that carry sports. That's to go to the local market to cover the billionaires that are still trying to pay off the multi-billion-dollar stadium that they bought so they can become even more billionaires. And I cannot wrap my head around how this is even possibly legal, that I am being charged to pay for something that I didn't vote for. Nobody voted for. Maybe somebody voted for it. I don't know. But Comcast just says, no, you have to pay this. Well, I'm done. I went and took the 2 receivers, the 2 boxes that I had, to a Comcast store in the middle of the afternoon. And I walk in, very nice. They take your name, and they tell you to have a seat, lots of chairs to sit in. And then I waited. It took about 40 minutes to call my name, which honestly, I expected it to be worse. And I go up there and they say, oh, well, your month hasn't completed that you've already paid for, so we're going to give you that credit back. And the cancellation was pretty easy. And then I said, I want to make sure that I get my $8.50 that I've been paying since January. And I want to make sure that you don't charge me any more money or ask for me to pay off the box that you guys lost. So they then said that they can give me 3 months of credit. And I said, no, I want 8 months of credit because this has been wrong for 8 months. Well, the rule is all we can give you is 3 months. What? You overcharge me and then you make an arbitrary rule that you are only responsible for 3 months. So we had some words. They put in an additional request for me to get 8 months of credit. I don't really expect it. And at this point, 5 extra months of credit times 8, it's about $40-something. And of course, the person there said, well, if they don't give you the additional credit, just come back into the store. No, I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. And I told the guy, I said, I'm not going to come back and sit for an hour or more to get $40 or $50 back from you. I'm just going to go on social media and complain about the service from this company. And he says, okay. Because his hands are tied, apparently. He can't do anything about it. So and I can't get really mad at the people that are trying to help me. It's the system. Comcast/Xfinity has created a system where they can overcharge you and not fix it month after month after month. And even when you get to the point where you walk away and end the service, they still aren't going to give you the money. And then the last little bit of funny, I got an email from Xfinity. It says, we have received, I'm not sure. Yes, we have received your cancellation request. And it just kind of struck me. It's not a request. I'm not asking your permission to leave. And quite frankly, Xfinity/Comcast, it's not me. It's you. You are the problem. And of course, part of me worries that, I've just gotten rid of the devil I know for the devil I don't know, because YouTube TV is run by Google. And now my internet, as well as my cell phones, are all with T-Mobile. So if I want to leave them, it becomes harder. And that's, of course, one of the problems with monopolies or near monopolies, because there's only 3 really big cell phone companies in the United States. So anyway, I just wanted to rant a little bit, share that with you. We're going to do something fun here and get on with the rest of the show. I am so delighted that you've decided to join us today and listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Of course, if you have an author that you'd like me to interview, let me know. If you have a topic you want me to cover, let me know. I did mention a whole lot of other possible topics during the 6 parts of the Polaris Plan because I didn't want to get too far afield. But if any of those interest you, send me an email. It is, of course, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I'll do what I can to fit in some other segments. I'd like to take a minute to review some political stuff that's going on. Apparently, throughout the United States, there's been a few elections in the last few weeks, and in most cases, a Democrat has done better than expected or better than Biden did in the presidential election just a couple of years ago. It is believed, and I think this is true, a lot of that is because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which I consider to be a horrific tragedy, denying people of their bodily autonomy. And from the people that want small government, the government is now going to get between you and your medical provider. It is awful, absolutely awful, and we must do everything we can to remove people who, for religious reasons, well, actually for any reason, who support these kind of ideas. I always dislike the slippery slope idea, that now they've done this, they're going to do something else. But the thing is, I'm not making up things that they'll do next. They're telling us. It has been mentioned that now they want to get rid of same-sex marriage. Well, if you don't want a same-sex marriage, don't get one. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't hurt anybody. Matter of fact, it helps people. If that's what they want to do, more freedoms, more choices. They've talked about reducing or eliminating control of birth control. A few pharmacists now feel emboldened to be able to deny you from medical treatments. It's just not cool. Not cool. And hopefully, once I'm an official resident of Florida, I can do my small part to help there, because in Illinois, to be frank, I'm not affecting anything. It's pretty much a Democrat-run state. And at least for national events goes that way. Of course, downstate, far outside of Chicago and St. Louis, it's can be very red, but maybe I can help make that difference in Florida once I'm officially there. So those are just some things to wrap up, things that are going on. In October, I will be at CSICon and FFRF's conference in Las Vegas, and then Santa Fe one week after another. So that's going to be a fun trip out southwest. But I'm going to wrap up for now, and I do hope to talk to you somewhere out there on the road soon. Until then, ciao.
Yeah, there ain't nothing that can stop our Lord. He's gonna rule forevermore. There ain't nothing that can stop our Lord. He's gonna rule forevermore.
I've got a God who's got my back when the devil is attacking. God's always in action, he's up there in heaven. When I come up short, I remember who's my Lord. I've got my armor on with the Bible as my sword. Devil's always attacking, he's always attacking. The devil's always attacking, he's always attacking. When my life is a disaster, I'm leaning on my Savior. When I'm in a bind, I know my God's a chain breaker. Jesus ain't a phony, he came down to save me. He suffered on a tree so that I could be redeemed. Devil's always attacking, he's always attacking. The devil's always attacking, he's always attacking. Yeah, there ain't nothing that can stop our Lord. He's gonna rule forevermore. There ain't nothing that can stop our Lord. He's gonna rule forevermore.
We're God's own children, adopted to his family. We'll be with him for all eternity. Said it once before that Jesus ain't a phony. 2,000 years ago he paid my debt on Calvary. Got no stress cause he's got my back. I'm like a superhero, man, I don't fear no attack. Now I put all my faith in the one true Lord. Is gonna rule forever. Yeah.